Alastair Clarkson, welcome to the Dylan Friends podcast. My friends, absolute pleasure, honoured to have you in the studio.
Good to be here, mate.
Mate, I must admit I'm a little bit nervous to have you in today. I've obviously played a bit of footy. I'm not sure if you remember. Played a bit of footy.
I remember that. I should be the one that's nervous because you're a relation of the great Jimmy Buckley.
Yes, that is true.
Who chased me around the ground in London, smacking me behind the ear every minute he could get. So there's a bit of Buckley Clarkson history.
Yeah, well, I was actually not going to bring that up. I spoke to Dad last night and told him I got Clarko coming in tomorrow, and he said, "Don't mention my name. Don't mention my name." To anyone referring to that Battle of Britain, but we will move on from that. My reasons are actually different. Sitting down with senior coaches has never been something that's been a big passion of mine. I loved it, but unfortunately, it just always ended up in heartbreak. So I'm just hoping today it's a little bit nicer and we can have it on a good note.
Yeah, well, let's see how we go,
mate. Obviously, Happy New Year. We're in the new year. It's a big year for everyone, really, out of COVID, but hopefully things track normal. But I suppose any year more than ever, it was a good time to relax and get a break. What'd you get up to in the off season? What'd you do? Spend time with the family? Get away?
Yeah, well, I was only saying to a mate yesterday that everyone's sort of getting back into town now from their own Christmas breaks, and I said, how'd you go over the last 2 weeks? And I said, the same as every 2 weeks across Christmas and New Year, the best 2 weeks of the year for me. You can chill from footy a little bit, and you're around all your family and friends basically and for a coach, that's the thing that probably gets sacrificed the most.
Yep.
And so, I get to the end of this 2 weeks and it's just like my wife Karen and I both said to each other yesterday, "Oh shit, the 2 weeks is over now." We got to wait until this time next year to have that opportunity again. But yeah, we have a great time. And
I remember those chats where you'd sit down at the end of the year and you say Christmas break, and the coach would be pretty strong on this. Boys, look after yourself. No fights, no injuries, get things right. Do you have those chats with your players?
Yeah, on a regular basis, and within our club, and this will now become outside of our club, we talk about the 4 Ps, which is the piss, the punt, the penis, and the powder.
Yep.
And where there's strife in anyone's life, by and large, one of those 4 is going to get you.
Yep.
And it's 3 of them are legal. One of them's illegal, but three of them are legal. So certainly the legal ones, it's just like, well, you're allowed to have a punt, and you're allowed to go out and have a drink, and you're allowed to spend time with a lady or male partner. But if you do those things excessively and foolishly, then you're going to find yourself in a little bit of trouble. And so we talk about our guys just on a regular basis, and not always me to the players and the players to me. Sometimes just break in groups and just have a chat about where in this next 2 or 3 weeks you might find yourself in a vulnerable position, and think about it before you go into the scenario rather than reflect afterwards.
At the end.
Because the reflecting afterwards might be a different scenario than actually giving it some thought beforehand. And that includes, you're going to have a drink, you're going to drive, if you go into an environment with mates, who are the mates? Do they understand the footy environment? Do they understand your professionalism, the background, all that sort of stuff of what you do and what your expectations are? And it's just a little bit around preparation and thought. And we're dealing with young men. They're not going to get it right all the time. We know that there's mistakes to be made, and many make them, including me. I made plenty over my journey, but what we try to do is now pass on our wisdom of the mistakes that we've made and hope that we can prepare our guys as best we can to avoid some of them. And there's pitfalls everywhere, but by and large it's held us in pretty good stead. And we have a bit of fun with it too. It also just normalises it a little bit, because what these young lads are going through, I come from a family of boys, so I was the youngest of a big family, and whatever's been transgressed has probably been transgressed in my family, and so I just try to pass on as best I can the wisdom of our ways.
Yeah, you couldn't have nailed it anymore. Although the players have actually thought maybe you need a bit of help with this because they want to add something into these 4 Ps. They want to call it the 5 Ps, and it's farming with a PH. Now, they're saying that this farm of yours that we were talking about off air, but you are a country boy. They reckon the farm might be causing you more harm than good at this stage. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, it has the last 12 months. I've been hospitalised 3 times from the farm. One I was grinding some steel posts and I was wearing the goggles, but I'm not sure if you ever been on an angle grinder, but it is the worst job. And so I had a lot of posts that I need to angle grind down. So it was just like I'll do one at a time, and then go and do something else, and then come back. And I was wearing the goggles, but because I was going and doing some mowing or some other work, and then I'd come back. This one time I came back, I forgot to put the goggles on. So needless to say, I got a little bit of steel in the eye that required hospitalisation, and they actually took a bit of a chunk out of the white of my eye when they needed to remove it. So that caused me a bit of eye trouble for a couple of weeks just before Christmas of 2020 or 2019. Sorry, and then I got myself in an accident involving a bit of petrol and a fire that gave me a bit of a singe and a bit of a fright. Ironically, around the time that we're helping out the Corryong and Buckley communities following the fires, which was this time last year. So it was a little bit embarrassing that I was singed as a result of a fire, and then just more recently I nearly broke my hand, squashing my hand between a sleeper and a bluestone, and so the players got good reason to think that maybe I'm going to be a casualty of that farm, but it's a great escape for me, and as you said, I'm originally a country boy, and even though my family weren't on a farm, my father was a builder, and mum was a kindergarten teacher, but our whole community was really farming. All my mates were from farms, and spent a lot of time on the land when I was a kid. And so having that little 3 or 4 acres down on the Mornington Peninsula is just an escape for me that just really takes me back to my childhood. But it's a dangerous escape at the minute. I need to be very, very careful.
So going back to that boy from, is it Cavina or Cavina?
Conniva.
Okay, neither.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So that's a town of 803 people.
Yeah.
Tiny.
Yeah.
You look back now, growing up in Conniva, you're a 134 game player, which unfortunately today, if we touched on everything, we would be here for weeks. 4-time Premiership Coach, and now you're a Dylan Friends podcast member. You look back now, and I know you're still in your career, in your prime, really. There's so many more times to go, and hopefully some more flags on the belt. But in a little bit of reflection now, do you sit back and go, fuck, I couldn't imagine this?
Always has a great passion for sport. There was a guy back in Conniva. As I said, I came from a big family, and my father was an Englishman who was born in 1928. He died 2 years ago. He had a great life, but his early years growing up in the UK. His first decade of his life was the Great Depression of the 1930s, for instance, and then get to the end of the 1930s and bugger me, Second World War starts. He was mucking around with a couple of mates, and one of his mates picked up a live hand grenade, and Dad got shrapnel injuries from that, letting off of that grenade. So. He had to leave school when he was 13 because anyone that could put food on the table did so at that point in time. So Dad became an apprentice carpenter, but he did an 8-year apprenticeship, would you believe, where he learned how to the joins of timber, and he became a real craftsman. But by the end of that 8-year stretch, he's in his early 20s, and there's this great promised land in the southern hemisphere of Australia that's got sun, that's got opportunity, and at that point in time, Europe, right across Europe, but they called them 10-pound poms, where they paid £10 to get on a boat, one-way ticket, and he and some of his mates got on that boat, but I thought it was just because they're called 10-pound poms. I thought it was just Englishmen, but it wasn't. It was a lot of people right throughout Europe because Italy and Macedonia and Germany and a lot of European countries were depressed at that point in time. And so Dad came out here, and when he got here, it was just like shirt on his back type of stuff, a couple of belongings in his bag, photograph perhaps of his brother and his parents, and that was it. And then made his way. He got sent to Rainbow up in Western Victoria because they said that's where there's work up there. Building shearing sheds and fences and all sorts of things and doing whatever he could. And then that dried up, and they said to him, well, there's more work at Conniva, so go there. So he went there after 12 months in Rainbow, and my mum was a teacher, and she got posted to Conniva. She's a Geelong girl originally. She got posted to Conniva as one of her first jobs. Poor bugger. She's like 4.5 hours, 5 hours to the west, and it's just desert, more or less, and just wheat country. And so they met, and they had 5 children. But my eldest brother, 10 years older than me, and Dad worked so hard because he didn't have an education. He wanted to be able to provide his 5 children with education. So all 5 of us got the opportunity to go away to boarding school. And have the best education, and not just about the education, but also, as you said, Conniva's got very few people. So, in all my classes, there was 20 in the class, whereas I go to school at boarding school in Ballarat, and there's 150 in my class at year 12, So, this is the diversity of people. I was going to school in Conniva, and this is no drama, but I was going to school in Conniva with guys who, nine of my classmates were sons of farmers, so their aspiration was just take over the land from their dad. Whereas you get down to Ballarat, and you got guys who wanted to play footy. You got guys who wanted to be an Olympic rower. You got guys that wanted to be doctors, lawyers. Like businessmen. It was just like, geez, just opened my eyes up to the world just simply by going from Conniva to Ballarat. Now Ballarat's not a big place either. Now that I've been in Melbourne, but for me it was just such an eye opener. So my father and mum, who was in education, wanted us to have that sort of opportunity. So, but to do that, Dad had to work damn hard, and he did. To put us all through boarding school, it was a costly exercise for 5 of us. So he worked hard, and we had this guy that was a mate of my elder brother. So there's a significant gap, but he was like a second father to me. His name was Oscar Harrison, and he loved sport, and he was like a second dad to me. So I just dagged around with him so much, and whether it was cricket or footy, I knew that my passion was in those 2 sports, and that my ambition was, could I live a life in these sports? Footy ended up being the calling for me. Still love my cricket, and still get enormously disappointed when the Aussies don't go so well like they did in the second test, and Boxing Day was a disaster for us. But very passionate about my cricket, and love following it, but it wasn't something that I was good enough to pursue and make a career out of. But footy has been, and I've been very fortunate to be involved in the game for a long period of time.
Yeah, well, just hearing you talk, then I think one thing that's evident is that you are grateful, and I don't know if that's something that you practice. I'm sure it is something that you're well aware of, but it's something that we love to talk about in the show. Is like being thinking back to why you're actually here, and how blessed we are to even be doing what we're doing. And yeah, I'm not surprised by the answer at all, because it's got you to where you are now, and you really appreciate those small things that have got you to where you are. Looking into your coaching career now, fast forward your time getting in. I suppose one thing I've always wanted to know about yourself is, and I know that it's hard for you to say this because it might be embarrassing, but like from an outside perspective, it seems like you have, honestly, you've come up with a lot of things, a lot of game-changing things that have changed the game. Was that evident like early? Did you think that you could have done these things, or did it sort of transgress and you develop these ideologies as you've come along and learnt as you've had time in the game as a coach?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've never really thought about it in depth, albeit it probably comes from upbringing and the messages that were indoctrinated from my parents. That at 14 years of age, I'm out of home in essence and independent and having to look after myself to an extent because I'm away at boarding school in Ballarat. So there was always this explore, innovate, create, an independence of your own thinking and being accountable for your own decision making, whether that was, what you're going to wear, where you're going to go, what time you're going to get home, whether you're going to drive, whether you're going to drink. Your own behaviour was all about you, really. And so that independence, I think, is probably. And I had to go through some hard yards. Not just me individually, but my family. I lost a brother when I was at boarding school. He was killed in a car accident in Ballarat, and so that smacked the family around big time. But I don't want to dismiss it because it was such a huge impact on our family. But you learn to try to develop reason out of these things and just understand that it's all part of the journey. There's hurdles to overcome everywhere, and that's probably the thing that I can bring, particularly at my age now as a coach. It's this empathy as a father figure to a lot of these players now that you understand the pitfalls of life, not just the pitfalls of footy. Now, the pitfalls of footy are even more significant because of the public nature of the game, the expectation, the popularity of the game, the difficulty of the game. Is a very, very complex and difficult game to play. And so that puts added pressure on young men. So how can you alleviate some of that pressure? How can you we spoke about the 4 Ps before. How can I forewarn these kids that there's landmines everywhere across this Christmas break, boys. Just be careful the way that you navigate them. If you do stuff up, I'm here to put my arm around you. Sometimes a kick up the arse and a slap across the ear hole, but sometimes also a nurturing cuddle to say, listen, it's going to be okay. We'll get through this. But it's probably that opportunity I got early on, and my father got that opportunity when he was 20-something years of age. My mum, believe it or not, got that opportunity. Her first teaching appointment was 4 or 5 hours away to the west, and so she needed to find herself in that period of time too, and out of that, good things happened to them. My father and my mother met, and they created a really beautiful life for one another. They loved the Kaniva community, and they invested in their family and their friends, and out of that they lived really, really good lives. Not good lives in terms of being wealthy, but rich lives in terms of their friendships and their family and then their community, and that's rubbed off significantly on me, and it's helped me enormously, I think, in terms of we use this saying, do not follow where the path may lead, create your own path and leave a trail. So it's all about don't necessarily follow anyone else and just copy, albeit in sport, the copycat of it, that's why I travel. It's just like, geez, Bill Belichick's doing this at the New England Patriots. I wonder if we could do that here. Arsene Wenger's doing that at Arsenal. I wonder if we could do that here. Steve Kerr's doing that at the Golden State Warriors. Geez, I wonder if that could apply to Australian rules footy. So there's a lot of copycat sort of stuff, but it's really looking at something and then trying to modify it to what your environment is or what your game is, and seeing where it goes. So I think it's just evolved over time. But what I am certain of is that my upbringing has significantly influenced that.
I love that. I think, to just further your point, and by no means am I experienced in life at all. I have no idea what the fuck's going on. But I do know that the best thing that I ever did, and it was by no choice at all, but it was move out of home and throw myself into a space. When I left Sydney, I had to grow up. Like I didn't realise how babied I was. And I think that you speak to a lot of guys that have gone to boarding school and, guys I've met, I think it's it does force you to grow up, and you know that no one's there to bail you out. So you can ingrain those standards in early into your mind. So no, I definitely resonate with that, and I had to learn those probably a bit harder because it was later and it's harder to change those habits. But if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be doing this today and sitting down with you chatting. So I'm forever grateful for that. Let's talk about what you just brought up then with guys that you may have. You look towards other coaches and innovate from games and think you can bring them to AFL or anything really in terms of structure or maybe on field, off field. I suppose it's a two-part, but is there anyone that you really admire, whether that be in sports or outside of sports, in business, politics, that you really look up to and you admire in their facet? And two, in terms of those going on trips, have you met any of those people before? I think you said you went to England, and I spoke to one of the boys yesterday about, I think that might be where the idea of the press came.
Yeah. Well, I was really fortunate early in my time at Hawthorn. I got to meet a guy called Phil Gartside, who was an English businessman, but he had business interests here in Australia that would have him travel here 5 or 6 times a year. And one of the guys who managed one of his businesses here in Australia was a Hawthorn supporter. So when Phil would come across to Australia, and he ironically now he's the president of Box Hill Hawks. His name's Ed Sill. So Ed managed some of Phil's businesses here in Australia. So every time Phil came across and for business reasons, Ed would take him to the footy. Now, this is in 2003, 2004. The Hawks weren't such a great side at that point in time. They were going through their battles. Ed would take Phil to the footy. So this one particular occasion, I'd just been got through I think it was the end of my first year, and it was the Peter Crimmins Medal, and Phil came to the event with Ed Sill, introduced me. Phil in his business dealings had also risen to a level where he was sought after by anyone to sit on boards, and one of those boards was the Bolton Wanderers Football Club in Premier League, and he'd been involved in Bolton for a long period of time, and they were in the Premier League under the management of Sam Allardyce at that point in time, and they punched well above their weight in terms of the size of that town, and to be competing against the Man Uniteds and the Chelseas and Man Cities and Liverpool's, they're up in the northwest of England, and so he said, anytime you want to come over, come and you can just be a fly on the wall and listen to everything that goes on here, and that's really where it all started. And Phil has since passed away, really sadly. He had a brain tumour and died about 6 or 7 years ago, I think it would be now. And but as a young man, 62 years of age, and I've been a little bit of a lost soul in a sense ever since he's passed, because he was such a strong mentor for a long period of time for me. But opened up the doors to so many opportunities, people to meet and clubs to visit, and not just clubs, but businesses and organisations, and right through Europe. And he was a fantastic mentor, and it gave me the opportunity to see things from a different perspective. And a lot of those things we've been able to bring back to our game. And some of it was to do with my professional life, and some of it was to do with my personal life. But all I do know is that his influence on me and my family, or my family and I, was profound.
No, it's huge, and I think it's, as you said, if you don't have those mentors, it's hard to learn those things. Is that, though, I suppose, going to that football club, is that actually where those ideas started to develop of the press? Or was it other functions as well?
Yeah, I can remember, watching. I think on the ABC when I was a kid. Dad wasn't a huge football follower, but we'd watch Match of the Day that came on. I think it was on a Monday night on the ABC, I can remember watching Tottenham Hotspur and a guy called Glenn Hoddle and just being mesmerised by this game because the support of their crowds was just so passionate. Hooligans mad, really, but I just loved the game of English football. And so a difference when you become a coach, it's just like, well, what are the things are they doing there, both with the management of their players and their people and their training methods and all that sort of stuff that we could adopt and help us back here in Australia, because we're a long way from anywhere in Australia, and to actually get that, there's a lot of things going on in the Northern Hemisphere that are fantastic innovation. Mind you, there's a lot of things going on in Australia because we're an island and a big island, but because we've had to be independent and forge our own way and cope with adversity, we've also now at a point where we do things a hell of a lot quicker and better than what they do in the Northern Hemisphere. But people in the Northern Hemisphere don't want to travel too much. No. So when we say that we've spent 26 hours on the plane to get to the UK and we're prepared to go back in 3 days, they just can't believe it. If they're going to be on a plane for 26 hours, they're staying for 6 months. But
they're staying in Bondi. They don't really leave.
But they're unlikely to want to come to explore in Australia. Yep. So ultimately, we have to get on a plane and go to them. But if you get the right environment, like I was fortunate enough to get at Bolton, and then have an entree into so many other clubs as a result of Phil introducing me to so many people, that ended up transcending to America. And so then North American contacts and clubs and organisations became a great source of information for us as well. But it's just bringing innovative ideas back to our environment here, whether they are to do with on-field or off-field, to assist us. And that continues to be a great passion. And one of the great difficulties that we're confronting right now is that we can't get outside our country, which is not great to be able to continue that innovation.
No, it's not. Going forward, I suppose now, because that innovation has got you to where we are today, 4-time Premiership Coach, 08, obviously a big one. I remember watching, that was probably the first game as a young kid that I really watched when I was really getting into footy. And I just remember that game so clearly. And then fast forward, 2012 obviously went down to Sydney, 13, 14, 15 from there. When you reflect on that now, you look back, is it somewhat of a blur, or is it still sort of, you can break down memories of each game? Like if you go back to 08, for example, Geelong that year were nearly the best team of the year, but on the day, the Hawks were the best team on the day.
Yeah.
What's your memories of 2008?
Well, you're right. Geelong were a stellar side. Bomber had put together a really good group of young players. Wellesley was heavily involved in that. Stephen Wells is their recruiting guy, and they'd really based it around a 3-year drafting period from '99 through to 2001. Ironically enough, Hawthorn too, just despite everyone talking about Hawthorn's success being based around our 04 draft with Franklin Lewis and Roughhead, and no one can question that. But it was probably that 2001 draft where Geelong did so well too. They got Ablett and Bartell and Stevie. Kelly. Stevie J was a little bit earlier, but across that 3 years, Stevie J and Scarlett came in at that point in time. Cameron Ling, some great players. So they drafted really, really smartly and really astutely and well. But Hawthorn did too. In 2001, they made a really tough decision to trade for the number one pick. They traded Crody, who was an up and comer at that point in time. He went to Fremantle. They got Fremantle's number one pick, and they used it on Hodgie. But in that draft, we also got Sam Mitchell, Campbell Brown, Rick Ladson.
Yes.
And all those guys went on to be really, really good players for our footy club. 2 of them Hall of Famers, ultimately in Hodge and Mitchell. So they and Geelong, we probably tracked a little bit behind Geelong, where our group was then complemented by the 2004 draft, which was Franklin, Roughhead, Lewis, and then Birchall and Rioli came in the next couple of years too. So we now had a complement of 8 to 10 players that you could just really build an era of success around. But in 2008, we're still sort of on our journey a little bit. We thought that our significant window of opportunity was going to probably start about 2010, and then maybe last for a five-year period, which ended up being true in a sense, because in that period through 12 to 16 we were really, really strong, but we jumped out of the box and we got our culture right. We got the right people in the right positions at the footy club, including at playing level 2, and ultimately when you get the culture right of your footy club, good things can happen, and good things can happen quickly. And but Geelong had won it in 2007 after having a poorish year from their standards in 2006. Bomber nearly got sacked as the coach. They stuck fat as a footy club, which I loved. I loved that with Bucks and Damon more recently. Stability and continuity are such important parts of footy clubs, and so they stuck fat with Bomber, and then the next year they won the flag. They smacked Port Adelaide, who I'd been to Port Adelaide, so I knew the quality of their playing group and the quality of their coaching group and their club, and got smacked by a record margin. So Geelong were now in that box seat window of like, who's going to stop them, sort of thing. But we played them about round 17 in the home and away series, and Hodgie of all our players, made some mistakes in the last quarter of that game. We ended up getting rolled by 10 points. But we're a really big chance to win that game, and Hodgie of all our players made 3 blues in that last quarter, because he wasn't captain of the club but one of our leading players. But he thought it's a close game. Yeah. If this needs to be won, I'm going to win. I can remember him clearly in the middle of the ground trying to take on the man on the mark. Hodgie's got some great attributes, but running around the man on the mark isn't one of them. He tried to take on this bloke, got stripped of the footy, ball went down the other end. I can't remember if there was a score, but we certainly lost territory. Yep. And it was so un-Hodgie. But in his life, this is the thing about things that are going on in one another's lives. Lauren was pregnant with their first child, Cooper, and like for him to have made 3 mistakes, but by the end of the game, lost the game by 10 points. The players are distraught. That was a game that we should have won. But I'm also thinking to myself, I could get down in the rooms and blow my top because we just lost a game that we shouldn't have lost. Or I could get down in the rooms and say, hey boys, we can beat these guys. Hopefully we get another chance later in the year. And for the players at that point in time, they were expecting me to blow my top. But the reassurance that came from, geez, if we get another chance,
we know.
So we're not guarantees, but we know we're going to be in the ballpark. Now we're a bit lucky in the grand final. The Cats kicked, 1 goal 10 or 2 goals 9 or some ludicrous scoring ratio in the second quarter that should have had them up by 3 or 4 goals at half time. So we're lucky to still be in the game at that point in time. When I say in the game, we're in front at half time by about a point or something, but only because of some poor kicking by the Cats. But we did recruit a little fella, not a little fella, he's actually a big fella, Stewie Jew, and he turned it on in the third quarter with a 10-minute patch of footy that created 5 goal scoring opportunities for us, and it really split the difference of the game. We went from being a reasonably even game to being 30 points up, and and Geelong rallied late in the third and early in the last, but ultimately I think Bud kicked a goal early in the last quarter that was probably going to put it just beyond them. But we got good memories of all of those years, but 2008 was pretty special because we'd come from such a long way back. 2004 we're pretty much the laughing stock of the competition. But to Swabby's defence as the coach before me, the club we'd come out of 91 winning the flag, and then 5 years later, Hawthorn had won so many premierships in 2 or 3 decades. 5 years after they win their last flag, they're now in a merger discussion and on their knees as a footy club. It's just like, hey, how could that happen? So all their resources, to be fair, at that point in time for the next, 6 or 8 years were all channeled towards how could the club just survive. So they didn't put a lot of resource to the footy program. It was just like we just got to get the club to survive and get it financially stable again. So Swabby was handcuffed significantly when he was the coach of the club, which is really unfortunate because he's a great man, a great Hawthorn man, great values and a great person. And but he didn't have the resources. I was really fortunate that Jason Dunstall was the director of footy at the time that I became the coach, and that was also at the time where the club had stabilised that they could now invest some time in footy, including the professional development of coaches and the opportunity for me when Phil Gartside offers an opportunity to go to Bolton, that the club would say, yeah, we'll find $5,000 or $10,000 for you to actually get on a plane and go to Bolton and learn some stuff and bring it back. And how can it help us? The club had always been in that mindset of innovation, but they just didn't have the financial clout to be able to provide those opportunities for their staff or for their players. And so I came in at a time where we could be more productive in that sense, and we got our culture right, and we're able to have success a lot earlier. Then, unfortunately, 2009, Clinton Young hurt his ankle in the grand final. Crody ruptured a tendon in his foot and never played again. I think Crody was 28 or 29. He's full back. So from 28 to 34 is the time that fullbacks play their best footy. He'd played some good footy for us, but by 28 he's buggered. And Robbie Campbell hurt his knee. Mark Williams had a degenerative knee, and he was never the player again. So Croft retired. We knew that he was going to. Dewey finished up a season later. So despite winning in 2008, we thought, geez, maybe the window started early for us, and now beautiful. This is going to be a 7 or 8 year period of time. 2009 and early 2010, we fell away really, really quickly. Not to the lower end of the ladder, but mid-table. And we had to reinvent ourselves in a sense. But fortunately for some things that we, the self-awareness to understand where we were and what had happened to us was really important for us. For a fair period of time there, you're sort of half in denial. It's just like, oh, shit, we're the premiers. We should be better than this. But if you actually got good people around you, you listen to them, and we'd fallen away. So we got ourselves back going again, and that helped us enormously. But there's some pain. Like 2011, we lost a prelim by a kick to the Pies, and then the following year, we 2012, in all my time coaching, was the best footy that we've played, and we were raging favourites to win the flag. But we came up against the Sydney side that, same sort of thing as in 2008. Dennis Pagan used to always say to us at North, just get yourself to prelims as often as you can. And at North, in that period of time that Dennis was coaching, got to 7 prelims in a row. But get there as often as you can. Guess what? The door will open for you sometimes, and it'll close, unfortunately, in others. And North won flags when they shouldn't have. Carlton knocked off Essendon in 99. When Essendon were raging favourites in that period, they took all before them in 2000 on the back of disappointment in 99. But Dennis said, just give yourself the opportunity. Sometimes, unfortunately, the door will smack in your face when it's least expected, and that was 2012 for us. Yet in 2015 and 2008 perhaps, when we weren't perhaps expected to salute, fortune favoured us, So you just got to get there regularly enough, put yourself in a position often enough, and knowing full well that when you least expect it, it'll come to you, and when you do expect it, it probably won't. So that's been our journey.
Well, I think that's right. You've just summed it up there completely. But if you look at it now and to summarise, like 2008, obviously you won when you might not have been expected to. heartbreak followed that. But without that, those next years, you probably wouldn't have won 3 in a row. Well, you definitely wouldn't have, because it's probably taught you there and got you to the sustained success that you needed to do that in a row. You won 4 flags, and it's hard to pick favourites, so we won't. But one thing I love talking about, and I love grand final day. Like I try and go as much as I can. And I think from being in the industry, there's always publicly big moments in games that people might see on commentary and they think change the game. But as a player and inside the 4 walls, there's always those other moments that are held even closer. From your point of view, do any moments really stick out for you that internally changed games in those big games? Like, it might have been something that a role player was playing, or a little tidbit that not many would pick up off the ball, that isn't on, like Channel 7 or Channel 10 that these guys don't see.
Yeah, well, a story that's become public because, there's been books written by, Mitch and Hodgie and Ruffy. Was a story around 2012. Sam Mitchell had a highly decorated player and self-made in a sense. Rejected in a draft, had to do the real hard yards, but was such a driven person. But that drive was also a weakness of his, because that drive would sometimes mean that his empathy for others or whatever was not as good as it could be at different stages. But in terms of drive of where he wanted to go, enormously powerful. But this is the journey that we were on, and Mitch was on this journey. And my job was to try to, like a sponge, take as much as we could out of that drive, but also over here try to assist him as much as he can to bring others along with him. But to be fair, he'd been rejected that many times. It was just like, shit, I've got to look after myself here because no one else is gonna. So you can understand it. This is like footy. This is the tough path to navigate. So Mitch in 2008 was the captain of the club. Tagged by Cameron Ling, held the cup, kicked a really, really important goal for us and valuable goal, left footer from about 45 out at the city end and in the grand final. But in his view, it was the only decent thing he did for the whole day. In fact, his stats at half time, he had more free kicks against than he had possessions. Now, for a guy who regularly got 35 touches, that was just unacceptable for him. And unacceptable for his coach, and probably let him know it at half time that he needed to be better than what he was. He's captain of the club. But out of that, in his own mind, despite holding up the cup, despite all his goals really being around trying to play in a premiership team, and he was dissatisfied with his own performance. And so 2012 rolled around, and by hell or high water, he was going to play well in that grand final, and he did. One of our better players in terms of not having more free kicks than possessions at half time. He had many more possessions than free kicks at half time in that 2012 grand final, but his opponent also had a hell of a lot. His opponent was Ryan O'Keefe, who ended up winning the Norm Smith medal and helping Sydney win. Out of that pivotal moment in his life, and on reflecting on the game himself, and he gave away a 50-metre penalty halfway through the third quarter, which was just so... Mitch is just so in the game, aware of what's going on, where players are, his teammates, where the space is, where the congestion is, where his teammates are, where opposition are, where the goals are, like what's going on in the crowd. He's just so astute. Including, rules when the whistle's blown, how much time you got, who's picked up the ball, should they give it back to an opponent. He flippantly threw a ball back to, he just wasn't, he was in Sam Mitchell mode, not Hawthorn mode in that game, far too much as a result of what had transpired in 2008. And so in his own mind, he thought to himself, I've cost Hawthorn this game. And the real moving thing for him was that by hell or high water, I'm going to next year not worry about my own personal sacrifice. And Buddy was the same. Buddy, I think, by that stage knew that he was leaving Hawthorn and going to go to Sydney when he played in the 2013 grand final. So we had two guys, perhaps outside of Hodgie, our two most decorated players in Buddy and Sam, who were prepared to do anything of sacrifice to their own game that was going to be for the betterment of the side. So with Bud, Luke McFarlane was a fantastic fullback and actually had the better over many duels with Bud. And so, but we knew that he was going to go to Franklin. How could we use Bud as a decoy higher up the ground that took McFarlane away from the key part of the ground where he could defend, and how could we expose another defender for Fremantle? And so Jack Gunson kicks 4 goals in that grand final in a low scoring grand final. So Bud, despite not having a great grand final, he's a member of a premiership side and we salute, and he's helped. Strange sort of way, McFarlane has no influence on the game. But similar with Sam Mitchell, we know that Ryan Crowley's go to Sam Mitchell. We also know that Sandilands is going to get his hand on most of the hit outs in the ruck, and he's going to try to hit it to either Fife or Mundy that are big men. Like these guys are 6'3", 6'4", and 92 to 95 kilos. Mitch is 180 at best, and 82 kilos, 84 kilos. And so he's given away weight, he's given away height, and he's given away numbers because it's Sandilands to either Fife or Mundy, and Crowley is more or less suffocating him like a blanket. But Mitch, do this job for us, mate. Just be a train wreck player, because it'll take 2 or 3 of them. It'll take the ruckman, one of Fife or Mundy, and Crowley. Somewhere there's 2 extra players for us. Now, he ended up with 8 or 10 or 13 touches for the game. And everyone in the crowd goes, oh, yeah, well, Mitchell's had another disappointing game in a grand final for us and for his teammates. And only within the walls of our footy club do they understand the significance and the impact that his sacrifice made for us in that grand final. And then the next year we play in 2014 and we play against Sydney. And Sydney obviously reflect on that 2013 game. They're not dumb. They've looked at that game. They say, geez, Sam Mitchell looked after 3 players for Fremantle that day. There was another 2 guys for Hawthorn that probably played well in the grand final for Hawthorn, all because of Sam Mitchell, because they were just running around on their own most of the day. We're not going to let that happen to us. So now Sam Mitchell gets freed up to just play the game. And finally, after 3 grand finals, he plays his 4th grand final and he gets what his wish was, to have a significant influence on grand final day where we win the flag and he plays the game in the way that he'd like to play, and he gets his 30 touches. He was in the best 2 or 3 players on the ground, and he feels like finally he's made a significant contribution. But this is the journey of AFL footy, and despite he and I, and we all thinking that we want to do it our way, sometimes you just got to go through some hard yards, and we've been through plenty. We've had some success too, but this, like right on the eve of the 2015 grand final, our captain of the club, Hodgie, gets done for DUI. It's just like, Christ, but there's just, these are young men and they'll make some blues along the way, and you have to withstand the public scrutiny. You got to understand your player, you got to understand the environment. You've already been dealt with by the court of law. You've been dealt with in a sense because you've been publicly shamed by being on the front page of the newspaper. Do we need to add to it as well by saying, we're going to impose a 1-week suspension? Or now there'll be times where you do need to do that. I can remember giving Hodgie a 1-week break in the first year that I coached at the club for an indiscretion. So it's not like, but there's a time and place, and everyone and every event needs to be treated on its merits. And so we chose at that point in time to back Hodgie in. He'd made a blue, and that strangely enough galvanised our group. We went across to Perth. We played West Coast in the first final. It was on the back of all this hysteria and speculation around whether he should even play, whether he should be captain of the club, should we stand him down, all this. But because of all that, we didn't play well. Hodgie didn't play well. But it galvanised our group, and then we came back and smacked Adelaide the next week, which Hodgie kicked the first goal. Then we had to go back to Perth to beat Fremantle, and Cyril did this fantastic bit of play to turn the ball over at centre forward and kick the goal, and and sealed the game for us against Freo. And then we had to play West Coast again here, which is a hot day. And we had an older list than what Freo did, other than what West Coast did. And we weren't expected to win that game. But in a really, really strange way, that event of Hodgie buggering up was what galvanised our group and our club. And allowed us to win a game that perhaps we might not have won had he not done what he did.
Mate, that's incredible insight, and that's the only things you'd know if you're in the four walls of the club. Now, when I get players on the show, normally I like to ask them what their best coach spray was. Unfortunately, I was on end of a few of them, which I still remember. Actually, one of your good friends, Bolts, he gave me one day. He could have been speaking Chinese. I don't actually know what he said, but I knew what he meant. Okay, it hurt, but one thing I always ask players, and they give their best. Now, you being a very successful coach, I'm sure there might have been times when things boil over and you need to give a spray. Does anything stand out to you?
The other thing that you need to do, and I've become much better at this in the latter stages of my coaching career, is pick your mark. But Hodge, Mitchell, and Lewis were all guys that were old school. Want to be hit straight between the eyes, and number one, they loved honesty. They loved immediacy, so you get it out there straight away. And they also had this about them well, I'll show you, you prick. This response that you get, like after we came back from that West Coast game when we lost in that final and Hodgie had transgressed the week before, and I can remember it wasn't a spray in front of everyone. It was just a spray, me and him, and the spray wasn't anything to do with his transgression. The spray was, you weren't the Luke Hodge. He was, despite him being seeming bulletproof and thick skin and tough and he's got a conscience. So when he went over there to play in that West Coast game, he wasn't the bull that I know that plays the game tough and close to the edge and physical and respectful, but tough and hard. He was running around getting kicks, and you go get the stats of that game. He had 35 touches, or 32 touches or something. He's in our best two players on the ground. And everyone said, despite all the adversity of the previous week, Luke Hodge at least still played well, but his team didn't, because his approach of just skirting around the edges and getting easy touches. He's a good player and knew how to go and get the ball, but he wasn't the Luke Hodge that I knew that day, and I told him so on Monday. Well, he wanted to, if looks could kill, he wanted to destroy me on that Monday after the game. But as I said, his response to that, loved the honesty. He didn't like what he was hearing, but he loved the honesty. He respected what my opinion was, and he responded in the right way. He was our best player the next week against Adelaide. And but it's just picking your mark and knowing when it needs to be done in a group setting, in a 1v1. But importantly, if you see it, say it. But pick your mark with that. And some don't respond in such a good way to that type of spray. Some do though, and Hodgie, Mitch, and Sam Mitchell were three guys that all responded really, really well. I didn't like it, but they always responded really, really well to any feedback that you give them about their performance.
Every bloke that I spoke to that you've coached and you still coach, they say they don't really see you as a footy coach, they see you as a life coach. And without having those relationships, you can't give sprays that people will probably feed from. Transferring that now into the coaching side of things, into the mental health side of the game, I know it's something you're extremely passionate about. I am myself as well. The reason we're now best mates is we're both ambassadors for Tackle Your Feelings, which is a mental health training program for community AFL coaches, and especially in rural towns, because out there the footy clubs is life, and growing up and having coaches and that can impact players in a positive space is what it's all about. Why are you so passionate about mental health?
Probably comes back to my country upbringing. I understand that the football netball club in the town, and the cricket and tennis clubs in the summer too, but football and netball clubs in the winter in a small community town are the hub of the community. You'll have farmers that have been on tractors and isolated for the whole of the week, but they get an opportunity to come into the town on the weekend to follow their local team, catch up with their mates and talk about what their week's been about, which is just so important. And so I understand that side of it. Also understand what's going on now in terms of, and I saw it right back many years ago. A great friend of mine going through school, his older brother committed suicide. And it's just like, how could that have happened? And since then, like a great mate of mine going through school, Mick Troon, who he took his life in the last 5 years, and Spud Frawley took his life. And if you could have told me two blokes that I knew, going through my schooling, 30-something years ago, and then meeting, I've known the Frawley family for a long period of time. But how could that happen? So there's the black dog, or this spectrum that we all live on. I just used to think, you're either unfortunately got caught up in feeling no good about yourself, and you're either like that or you felt positive about yourself, and so it was either one or the other, when in actual fact we sort of all live on this spectrum that has good or bad in our lives, and events and so the event in my life was my brother being killed in a car accident when I was going through school in Ballarat, and it could have actually sent me in, and for a period of time I was all over the place really, and just lucky really. I had family and friends and some people that looked after me and steered me in the right direction, because I could have quite easily, and many will say to you, if you knew Clarkson between 16 years of age and 19 years of age, it's just like, whoa, geez, he's a little bit out there. And I was lucky to find my path, which was AFL footy, and the professionalism of that allowed me to sort of get back on track. But I was just lucky I navigated my way through those years from 16 to 19 okay. But geez, I did some things I'm not too proud of in that period of time. Yeah, this spectrum would have us all go through these experiences, but unfortunately, some who I talk about above the line and below the line. Above the line meaning you're in a space where you're positive and thinking of good things about your life and what's going on in it, and then below the line it's just like, geez, your brother's just been killed in a car accident, or you've just lost your job, or you've just been kicked off the footy team, or whatever it might be, and then getting down about something, or geez, there's a drought, these farmers, or Buckley and Corryong and all those communities, King Lake, Traralgon South, all these communities that just have their lifeblood ripped out of their communities because fire rips through their towns and their communities, and it's just like, how can you that event not define you? How can you get back above the line? And that's where I know community football clubs can assist so much, because particularly in the bush, where the livelihood of a lot of these families is out in remote regions where they're not conversing with one another and talking through what their feelings. At the end of the day, all this is communication. Fortunately, footy clubs is about people and about communication. And what a footy club does in the country each week and on game day, and then perhaps twice a week on a Tuesday and a Thursday night at trainings, allows people to come together, and it's just like, and either with observation through eyes or listening or whatever, just observe how people are going and what support they might need. And when they need support, what can you say or do at that point in time to help this person get above the line, either by the actions that you've got with what you've said, or by just having a basic conversation that helps get that person above the line himself. And that it's just recognising there's this spectrum, we all live on it, And we all have our good days and our bad days, or our good moments and our bad moments. And can we recognise triggers ourselves that helps us get above that line? And where possible, can we educate football communities, in particular football coaches, that in that environment, in that community, what can you guys be doing to create the environment that allows more of your people to recognise when they're below the line, and how can they get above it? And I think as an ambassador of this Tackle Your Feelings, if we can get that out there, me and you and several others who are going to be ambassadors, and Leon Cameron and many more who's going to be out there trying to spread that message. I know that the football clubs right around the country, and it doesn't just need to be, for me, my passion is around country because that's where I came from, and I know the importance of a footy club in the community. I know the implications it's got, and the catastrophic implications it's got if it's of events that take place if it doesn't work out so well. But this is metropolitan footy clubs. It's not just Victoria, it's South Australia, Western Australia, it's Tiwi Islands, it's up the north of Queensland, it's everywhere really. If we can get the message across, then hopefully we'll make a difference.
Yeah, I'm sure we will, mate. I think you've absolutely nailed it there in terms of coaches having such a high responsibility that they might not know they actually have to be picking up awareness signs of players. Because if you've got happy players and people off field and their lives going well off field, then things will transgress on field, whether that's locally, professionally, and from all reports, that's what your players love about you as a coach, is that you worry more about them as a person, because then you know that if things are going well for them as a person, then they're going to be going well as a player. Alastair Clarkson, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. You've been so generous with your time. Looking forward to working with you for Tackle Your Feelings. If you want to know more about that, head to the website. We'll have that in the show notes. And I'm pumped for you 2021, mate. It's going to be huge. Hopefully the Hawks can win a few games. If you need me to come down and show them a few things, I'm more than happy to do that.
I might used to be a tackle coach, big beast like yourself, to show the boys how to
I did keep Suriel like 3 goals one day, so I'm actually quite happy to do that anytime.
Good on you. Thanks, mate.
Hey guys, Dill here. I'm proud to announce that I've recently become an ambassador for Tackle Your Feelings, which is a free mental health training program for community AFL coaches. The program aims to give local footy coaches, those in charge of the tackers through the twos, the tools to understand, recognise and manage signs of mental health issues in their players. Bringing awareness to mental health is important to me because I know that we all face challenges along the journey, but sometimes we don't have the tools to deal with it by ourselves, and sometimes it's because people aren't confident to have a conversation about mental health. Head to tackleyourfeelings.org.au to learn more about the program, meet the other ambassadors, and find out how you can register your club for a session.